My name is Yanel De Angel. I am an architect with Perkins and Will. When Hurricane Maria happened, there was this awakening of the diaspora. I'm sure you can all relate, and this sense of urgency to do what we could. I reached out at that point to the CEO of Perkins and Will, and I said, hey, there was an earthquake in Mexico recently. We pulled together and we sent some relief. What can we do? And I was very surprised by his answer. He said, if you like to organize sending any relief or collection of money or whatever you want to do, I'm not going to get in the way. There were people in our Miami studio, New York, LA studio really wanting to do something. And he said, but if you want to do something else, I will only support something of consequence. And with that kind of opening of a door, we, by a lot of synergies, we created ResilientSEE. ResilientSEE is really a platform for academia, the private sector, and nonprofit organizations to come together and collaborate. We have this initiative specifically for Puerto Rico because we understood the urgency and we really wanted to pilot it there. Now we exist in Mexico and in Atlanta as well. So what I will share with you today is a little bit of our journey, some project examples, and I will not cover everything that I have here, but if you have questions, we can always come back. As you know, the risks of the island are by now well known and documented. People laugh, but we were very close to being hit by a meteorite, which landed in the Atlantic Ocean, as if we needed something else to deal with. We, the focus of this presentation, I thought it might be more beneficial for you to understand how we as an NGO can leverage collaborations, as I mentioned, at the intersection of different groups, and perhaps more on the lessons learned, identify and prioritize what are the community needs, because we are really based on help from volunteers. So when we are asked to be part of a project or we want to take on a project, we really need to understand and be very intentional and well aligned to help. And because of that, and the need is so great, we really want to calibrate the right scale of our intervention. Sometimes, and you will see, sometimes our intervention is an educational resource. Sometimes it's a replicable planning concept or a unique solution. So we really are a multidisciplinary team. Teams are formed depending on the need and what is the problem to be solved. Our volunteers range, we really think we are transdisciplinary because we're not only part of these multi-disciplines, but we can put each other's thinking with synergies in a very different way. Our commitment as it relates to Puerto Rico, we are there for as long as it takes and as long as we can sustain it. The C in the name ResilientSEE really comes because we are focused on the social, environmental, and economic resilience. And if you want to know a little bit more about the methodology, we really think about it in these different buckets, but it's really not a silo at all. It's really about a comprehensive lens and a systems approach to our solutions. And more importantly, the solutions are really co-authored because we believe sustainability cannot be bestowed. People really have to take it and own it. And that only happens if you are co-authoring with communities. We have many projects. I will probably focus more on high level on one that was at the onset of the Hurricane Irma and Maria. And then one that we have ongoing now that I mentioned could be of resonance. We did some of this work with advice from FEMA. So variety of projects, some are guides, some are very much about planning, large scale, medium scale, sometimes very small scale, and sometimes it's a building. We work hand in hand with communities, with our partners and collaborators, and really have an emphasis on a horizontal approach where everyone's voices matter. And at the end, for us, not only co-authoring, but a data-driven solution and process is important. This is one of our lessons, is you will be having a community meeting and people that have gone through the tragedy of an emergency really feel, well, I feel this or I saw this. And what we do is to have a productive conversation. We present the data in a way that is more objective so people can see the circumstances through a different lens. And we have found that consensus is built much better when the data is represented as it is. So Evie mentioned some of the work we have been part of. We did not lead this, but we were the technical advisor for the guide. And it's a guide for resilient housing that enterprise led with many collaborators that you see here. It's a tremendous resource. It has 7 chapters, and it really takes homeowners, professionals through all the layers of what a resilient home could be. And I said a home, but we looked at diversity of typologies, including multifamily. You have here a link to that resource, and it is in English, it's in Spanish. It's actually an interactive resource online, or you can download the PDF and have it for your own use. At the onset of that, we also developed and led a community together, a guide for resilient communities. And I will tell you that this work is really fundamental to the work we're doing right now across communities, because it really focuses on this idea of organizational capacity, so that as communities identify buildings that could be these community centers, they needed to understand how to use the physical asset, the building, but what is the kit of parts that you need to make that community center resilient? How do I run it? And who are the actors that I need to partner with to make this work? Most importantly, something that is hard for some people to understand is that a resilient community center doesn't happen. You don't turn a switch when the emergency happens. This is a year-round activity that involves the community. So when an emergency occurs, you're ready, you're prepared, and you can take action. So the guide really answers this question: what is a resilient center, and what are these components? It has 4 parts. My favorite part is part 4, where we had the opportunity to visit a series of communities that were all at different levels of development, and learn from their stories, how they did community mapping, how they went about partnerships, what are the services they offer to the community, and so on. Some of the images that you're seeing now, this is a model that is under exhibition at the National Museum of Puerto Rican Arts and Culture in Chicago. Unfortunately, it's all online. You can visit the exhibition online, but this is one of the items there. So this would have been an educational resource. This project has many layers, because it all began with a visit to Toa Baja. We are very proud of this work because many collaborators have been at this for quite a bit, and we have won many awards. We usually don't, we collaborate with government, but we don't have any particular alliances to government. In fact, for us, it's really important to remain in the intersection of the nonprofit world. As you know, politically things might change, but if there is an organization based approach whatever strategies tend to live longer. However, I do have to say that when you find a facilitating municipality, it changes everything, because they have the power to gather people. They have connections to resources, and a lot can be done. And I am very thankful to the leadership in Toa Baja who have enabled a lot of the work we have been able to do. So this project began with a relationship with MIT Urban Risk Lab, who helped us look at the level of the island. So there are 3 scales here. There is an island assessment that we did at the onset of the hurricane. From there, we zoom in into the Toa Baja municipality, and from there we zoom into a neighborhood that we were asked to be involved with. So we did this analysis. I'm not going to go into the details, but to give you a flavor, a lot of research was done by a local architect, Ricardo Alvarez Diaz, and his firm. And with that research and our ability to use GIS, we did this parallel of, the island versus the scale of the municipality, really to open the eyes of everyone that in a map you might have drawn the lines of a municipality, but the island is an ecosystem and everything is connected. So you really need to be speaking at a regional level. You need to be engaging with your neighboring municipalities. So we looked at hydrology, ecology, topography, kind of the social data that was there available, the infrastructure, and kind of bringing all of those layers together to really understand what is the intersection of these vulnerabilities and how we could address them. At a very high level, we came up with 3 driving principles, especially for the community and the leadership at the municipality to understand that with driving principles, you can have productive conversations. So one was about restoring the ecology. A lot of the, over 50% of their land is floodable, and they need to understand how the ecology works, respect it, so that they can live in, in harmony. And some of that requires relocation of communities, which is a really hard subject to tackle. But also they were in the process of a corps of engineers had this approved major infrastructure project of the canalization of the Rio La Plata, and we helped them see that it cannot just be a hard, solution, but also a natural solution. And we thought about it as a corridor, an ecosystem corridor for recreation and other aspects. And as I mentioned, the hard conversation of, yes, you might need to relocate centers, communities, because you are in harm's way. Like many communities in the island that will be informal in nature, they see open land, they settle, and they might not realize that actually they are settling in land that is in harm's way. And then lastly, this idea of building smarter, where all the resources of the guides can come in. We had this opportunity to pilot a tool that MIT was doing actually for FEMA. And this tool is an early resilient planning tool. It was piloted in several municipalities, and we partnered with MIT to help facilitate that with the Toa Baja. In addition to that, we partnered with NASA Develop. They came to us having seen some of the work, very interested in how they could leverage satellite imagery and very, robust information that they have to do something productive. So the outcome was this flooding tool that is available to the community. You can go to the website and you can actually move that cursor and understand susceptibilities, vulnerabilities, and risks. And many communities were saying, FEMA says that this land is floodable, but we didn't experience that. So a tool like this enable those conversations. So this is public and you can access it. These are some of the products that came out of that. Is a GIS database, but a lot of people work on this, including some Puerto Rican PhD students that were part of NASA developed at the time. And then the next level of planning, we were asked to look at a community called Villas del Sol. They were given the land that you see here, and infrastructure was promised, but it never came. They are immigrants from the Dominican Republic that were taken out of the land where they settled in a very terrible way. You know, some international nonprofit organization have to intervene for human rights at that point. And it was great that they were given this land, but none of the infrastructure promise arrived. So what we tried to do was to do a very conceptual framework plan to help them secure funds and have conversations with different agencies. So here we intersected with the Department of Agriculture to see if we can use land around them in some sort of agreement for a very natural way to deal with stormwater. We intersected with EPA to think about ways of dealing with septic systems and so on. So this is some of the product of that, an open frame plan. The parcels were a given, so we were working within that constraint, but really, you know, bringing not nature as part of, you know, mitigation for heat, mitigation for stormwater, and so on, and locating that community center that exists with open land around it so that they could do in the future have preserve some open land for the community within the bounds of what they own. You can see here some of those collaborators. I'm going to fast forward because we have a lot of community centers and also a passion of mine, fisherman communities. But I'm going to fast forward to the project that I mentioned in Guanica because it was done at right after the earthquake. We organized very quickly. We created this webinar series on safety, not only for hurricane, but for earthquakes. And then connected with the municipality in Guanica and FEMA, who said, you know, we have this great need. You know, when the earthquake happened, we were struggling. We didn't have the capacity to shelter that many people. They wanted to just have a shelter. And we said, I think for this to be sustainable, it really needs to be a community center that flips into a shelter in times of emergency. Otherwise, you're going to have a building empty for most of the year, and it is not an asset for the community. So they identified 3 sites. This is a great project because we had here several nonprofits coming together. We have volunteers from the private sector and a great collaboration with the Boston Architectural College and Professor Ruth Sabater, 2 students, one of them being Puerto Rican. And the work that you can do when you're involving students is totally game changer. You are involving the next generation in these solutions. You're giving them a voice, giving them a platform to provide their ideas, and we all benefit, you know, from those perspectives. So 3 sites year-round, but also emergency use. For us, you know, understanding the context, you will see this idea of an inclusive place. We heard directly from the community how the LGBTQ community has a really hard time finding a place where they are welcome. People with different body abilities also have a hard time. Elderly people and so on. So for us involving the Boston Architectural College, Professor Ruth Sabater actually did at the level of Massachusetts, an inclusive guide for shelter. So she really brought that depth, and we greatly benefited from that. So you saw the 3 locations are empty, are owned by the municipality. We took a very careful look at the damage from the earthquake. Our inclusive design approach focused on all kinds of populations, including pets that come. Many people don't want to leave their house because there's not a place for the pets. We created a critical adjacency diagram in conversation with the community and also with FEMA because of the logistics and the operations that need to happen here. And we had this dream that this could be a deployable solution. And we did a lot of research on presents and came across this Japanese present. It's a kit of parts, it's cardboard, and it could be very quickly assembled. We really like that it's mainly renewable materials. You have this idea of privacy just by the simple use of these curtains. And it doesn't take a lot of space to store. And it actually aligned with the idea that we have of having some kind of court, basketball court, or some facility like that that could be of benefit to the community year round. And it so happens that all 3 sites the municipality put forward had some kind of basketball court. Some were in very bad condition, but the community already identified that site as a place of coming together for recreation. So 3 shelters, this is, the amount of people that could be sheltered. As you know, FEMA accounts for the amount of people that could be sheltered in a different way, the formulas that are used. But if we were to think about it in hurricane mode or earthquake mode, the amount of people that we could shelter could vary depending on how it's operated. The gist of the idea, which we believe is replicable, is that depending on the size of the community and how many people you're trying to shelter, there could be a very modest building that really is the community center attached to a 1, 2, or 3 court facility that during time of emergency, that big volume of space turns to become the emergency shelter. So you can see here that concept of the big box that's in this example is the 2 court and a more modest building as a gateway with important aspects all around, community garden, recreation, a water park that actually switches to outdoor showers in time of emergency. This is the year-round use. And then in time of emergency, how can we have that concept of the modularity inside to provide adequate space? COVID was already happening when we started this project. So we had a lot of conversations about public health and how to deal with that. And this idea of these modules was welcome in the sense that you could have family units being co-located and not necessarily mixing with others. In blue, you see some of the temporary showers, and also in purple, some of the temporary toilets. The big, some of the community aspects, like a kitchen, it's inside the community, smaller building proper, but with access to serve, and convert into a kitchen. We understand that if it's an earthquake situation, a lot of the services that will typically have to be inside the large volume area could go outside because wind is not a problem when you're having an earthquake emergency. So tents could be outside and therefore you can have more people inside the shelter. One of our critical partners is Voluntariado de Ingenieros. They provide a lot of the assessment for the structure, if the building is existing, but also in this case, new construction. They provided 2 options that are both viable. And Another important partner was WSP engineers. They created a strategy for water and energy, and something that could be completely on its own for at least 3 days. And how could that be also tied to the grid and tied to municipal resources, year round. So I'm not going to go into the details, but you can see here a lot went into the calculations of all of that. I'm going to share in closing a bit of the student work, which is super exciting. So Rios Sabater was interested in two aspects. One is developing this shelter module unit. And you can see here how we work in conceptualizing for that diversity of population. She was also interested in wayfinding so that people were not overwhelmed upon coming into such a big volume of space. Ryan Downs actually is a registered architect, and he was part of this class. He's doing a master's. He was interested in this notion of the exterior outdoor shower, which is a part of the culture of a beach kind of island thing that happens when you go to the beach in Puerto Rico. It's normal that you will take a shower outdoors with your bathing suit on. So people were like, oh, this is a great idea. So we don't have to have all of those resources of showers inside. And he happened to be a former FEMA employee, and he helped us develop an operational and logistic plan for how you will service these different sites. I am showing you one site, but we developed all three. And then Ruth Soper, as I mentioned, she did this work at the level of, actually it was for FEMA as well, Massachusetts, and she did a very targeted operational policy proposal for how we could run these shelters. You can see here a list of the items that were part of that policy. It's a larger document that I'm sharing here in an abbreviated fashion. I will say our lessons learned were that, well, we had no choice but remote collaboration. It worked. We felt very confident going in that people were, coming to the meetings, we were making decisions and moving forward. The partnerships, as I mentioned, were critical, and really a dynamic engagement with the community and government leaders, and the recognizing that we understand that there are a lot of obstacles in relief services, and access to funding is a huge, roadblock, at least a perceived roadblock, because they don't know, and we are there to support. So, for example, FEMA really gave us a mini course on community mitigation grants, and that was really helpful. And now the municipality is going after some of those funds. So I'm going to stop there. I do, I have much more than I can share, but I feel that if anything is of interest, I can share again, and we can go to a slide. We have other community centers or transformations, I should say, ongoing, and I have some of them here, but I chose to share Guanica because I think the scale and the replicability, could be of resonance when you're thinking at, a planning level. So I stop there and can take any questions.